Even in 2023, Mono Blue Spirits is still the premier tempo deck in Pioneer. If you love countering your opponent's spells every turn while chipping in with small flyers, this is the deck for you. Let's go over the basics. The deck is based around having 12 1-drops. Mausoleum Wanderer is the strongest one and one of the best cards in the deck. It comes out as a 1/1 flying spirit, but take a look at this buff ability. Whenever a spirit enters the battlefield, it gets +1/+1 until the end of the turn. This often lets us chip in for extra points of damage on our turn, but the true strength of the card lies in its defensive abilities. This last line, sacrifice Mausoleum Wanderer, counter target instant or sorcery unless its controller pays mana equal to Wanderer's power. The Curse Catcher ability here can catch your unaware opponents off guard, or even if they are aware of it, it forces them to play 1 to 2 turns behind to avoid getting their spell countered. I and many other people loathe Mausoleum Wanderer because of how hard it is to play around. But if you can't beat the card, play it yourself. Spectral Sailor might not do as much as Mausoleum Wanderer, but it's still a respectable 1-drop. Having Flash fits incredibly well into our game plan of holding up interaction, and next to flying is the most important keyword in the deck. Also, while that last ability might not look like much, paying 3 and a blue to draw a card can be game-changing in grindy matchups against control and mid-range. Our final 1-drop Ascendant Spirit is the reason to go mono blue. Without needing to run dual lands, we can play snow-covered islands as a majority of our mana base. This is the only creature in our deck that doesn't naturally have flying, but it does gain flying once you level it up the second time. Depending on the matchup, Ascendant Spirit is either one of your worst cards or one of your best. Let's say your opponent is playing a red deck and has damage-based removal, there Ascendant Spirit can win the match all by itself. But if you're playing against black, this card loses to Fatal Push instantly. While I go back and forth on how good this card actually is, only these mono blue spirit builds get access to it. Possibly the best card in our deck, Curious Obsession is part of the reason we want to play so many 1-drops. Our flying creatures often can't be blocked, so playing Obsession on turn 2 to immediately draw a card is exactly where we want to be. The deck also runs 1 to 2 Combat Research as additional copies of Obsession, but Combat Research barely holds a candle to the real thing. It's one of the worst cards in our deck. The third piece of the puzzle is Geistlight Snare. With 1 spirit on the board, this card is Mana Leak. With a spirit and an enchantment on the board, Snare becomes one of the most powerful counterspells in Pioneer. Paying 1 blue to counter your opponent's 3-drop, for example, is a huge swing in your favor. Combining these 3 pieces, a 1-drop spirit, Curious Obsession, and Geistlight Snare, is what this deck wants to do every single game. So if this is the game plan of our deck, let's see how the other cards help us achieve it. Rattlechains, right next to Mausoleum Wanderer, is one of my all-time favorite Magic cards. When Rattlechains enters the battlefield, target spirit gains hexproof until end of turn. Let's say your opponent tries to remove your obsessed Wanderer. You respond by flashing in Rattlechains and giving the Wanderer hexproof, fizzling their removal spell. Not only did you save your creature, Rattlechains is still on the board as a 2/1 flyer. This innate 2-for-1 is what makes Rattlechains an instant 4 of in any spirits deck. That last ability, you may cast spirits as though they had flash, allows us to play strictly on our opponent's turn and can do some tricky stuff as we'll see during gameplay later in the video. Supreme Phantom, this 2-mana lord is huge for speeding up the clock, allowing us to kill our opponents faster. Also, don't sleep on that 1/3 body. Against aggressive decks like mono red and mono white humans, having a Phantom as a blocker is life-saving. Like Rattlechains, Supreme Phantom is an instant 4 of in any spirits deck, and it's something you probably don't want to be sighting out ever. I'll be honest, I was not very impressed with Shacklegeist the first time I read it. Sure, tapping down your opponent's massive attacker can be life-saving, but the card doesn't do much else. Or so I thought. Shacklegeist plays much better than it reads. Because its ability uses the word tap rather than the tap symbol, you can use summoning 6 spirits to tap down opposing creatures. This is huge. I can't tell you how many games I've won on the back of Shacklegeist, tapping down my opponent's Cavalier of Thorns or a gigantic Illuminator Virtuoso. You can even use Shacklegeist to tap down mana dorks on your opponent's upkeep. While it might not be great in every matchup and gets cited out often, its repeatable tap engine is unique and very powerful. Also, Shacklegeist is a 2-mana 2/2 flyer, which is actually a pretty big body by spirit standards. Don't forget that Shacklegeist's ability doesn't require tapping itself. You can swing in with Shacklegeist and use other spirits to tap down your opponent's creatures. While not as good as Geistlight Snare, Lofty Denial is still a great counterspell and basically acts as Snare copies 5 and 6. Spell Pierce is incredibly flexible, countering Thought Seizes, 3-mana Planeswalkers, Fable of the Mirror Breaker, or protecting your creatures by countering removal spells. We only run 1 in the main deck because it's not relevant against creature-heavy decks, but we do have 2 more in the sideboard. Slip Out the Back quickly became one of my favorite pet cards when it came out in New Capenna. Phasing not only stops targeted removal, it can save a creature from a board wipe. You can also phase out your opponent's creatures in a pinch, either putting them off a turn on a lethal attack, or phasing a key blocker to clear the way for a win. Moving on to the mana base, Faceless Haven is our other snow payoff. This manland was good enough to get banned in Standard, which should be a hint that it's pretty good. It counts as a spirit, and that has several applications. We can save it from a removal spell with Rattle Chains, it gets pumped by Supreme Phantom, and if you're really in a pinch, you can use it as a spirit to tap down something with Shacklegeist. Besides that, being a 4/3 with Vigilance is huge, allowing us to attack with Faceless Haven and still use it for mana on our opponent's turn. Like other manlands, it also has the benefit of dodging sorcery speed removal, board wipes, and any removal that includes the non-land permanent clause. Our meat and potatoes is 17 snow-covered islands. Playing a monocolored deck like this makes the mana base not only cheaper, but easier to play. There's no deciding on which pathway you should play, or missing a second pip because of bad draws. You just run islands. Easy. Finally, we run 1 Odawara Soaring City. This uncounterable bounce effect will oftentimes just be a land drop, but it can also save you from certain death in a pinch. Going through the sideboard quickly, we have 2 Aethergust against mono green and red aggro decks. 2 Aethersphere Harvester is our best answer against aggro and mono blue. Not great, but it's mono blue. 2x Brazen Borrower is great against fair decks that like to trade 1 for 1, such as Rakdos Midrange. 2x Fading Hope is very good against creature decks, especially the hyper-aggressive ones like mono white humans and Atarka Red. 1x March of Swirling Mist is an answer to board wipes. Side this in against control. 3x Mystical Dispute is an auto-include. Besides beating up on all blue decks, this is one of the most important cards in the mirror match. 1x Shore Up is just an additional protection effect. While Slip Out the Back is great most of the time, sometimes you don't want your creature to phase out. Finally, we have 2 more Spell Pierces against the matchups it hurts most. That's primarily Izzet Phoenix and other tempo decks. Don't forget that this can counter vehicles too. That's the entire deck. Now, let's get into some gameplay and see how this deck does in the 2023 meta.
Round 1. Fight!
Nice. Our first opener has 2 threats, a counterspell, and a form of protection. I like it. Our opponent is, in fact, a Yorion deck. That is good to know. Yorion tells us this is a Fires of Invention list or possibly blue-white control. Hallowed Fountain tap makes me think, yeah, this is where I messed up. Hallowed Fountain should have told me control, but I had it in my head that my opponent's a Fires list because control decks haven't been running Yorion lately. Yeah, yikes. I don't know. Ardenvale makes me think blue-white control. Unfortunate. Okay, I thought wrong. That's my mistake. So we get punished for it. You hate to see it. Our next move is to play a Shacklegeist and protect it, hopefully untap with it. Nice, we drew the Curious Obsession. We really need this to draw some cards and luckily have a bunch of ways to protect it. When we attack, our opponent tries to destroy our Shacklegeist, and we have our choice of protection spell here. I decide to go with Slip Out the Back over Rattle Chains to avoid a board wipe the following turn. This does mean we lose out on a card from Curious Obsession, but a potential 3-for-1 from a board wipe would set us so far behind that it's not worth it. Draw Cemetery Illuminator, that's not terrible. Go to combat, get in for 4. Wandering Emperor, probably. Yep. Do we counter it? We could just counter it. Then we can't counter it to Fairy. I think we let this live. It is not the scariest thing. Because we can kill Planeswalkers through combat, and we have protection for the Wanderer's Exile effect, countering it just isn't necessary. I'd rather save it for a Teferi or a scarier spell. Okay, we drew into a land, which is great, because we played a second land, and now we're holding up Snare plus Slip, which I feel real good about. So we're just gonna pass. Our opponent buys Yorion, kills their Emperor to make a dude, and passes. While we could play the Illuminator here to see an extra card, I don't want to overcommit to the board unless I have to, so we decide to go to combat and see what we draw off the Obsession. We draw a Mausoleum Wanderer. We have the Rattle Chains, we don't have to play anything. See, I'm glad I waited because I waited long enough to realize that I'm silly. Our opponent cycles on our end step before untapping, getting in with their token, and on their second main phase, casting Farewell. Because of the flash clause on Rattle Chains, rather than use a real counterspell here, we're able to flash in Mausoleum Wanderer and sack it as a force spike against our opponent's board wipe. On their end step, we flash in Cemetery Illuminator to put 8 power on the board, and the opponent scoops it up. Shore up, some spell pieces. Unfortunately, our first hand is a bit slow. In a matchup where we need to be the beatdown like this, I need something a bit faster. Much better. 2 1-drops, double Supreme Phantom, and a Mystical Dispute. We decide to keep the second Supreme Phantom over Ascendant Spirit, which might not have been the right play. We draw a second Mausoleum Wanderer, a card that kills very quickly with 1 Supreme Phantom, let alone 2, so we're feeling pretty good heading into this game. Get in for 2. The thought is to play a Supreme Phantom and get in for hopefully 6 next turn. Omen of the Sea, that's fine. Our opponent plays the land and passes, leaving us with a tough decision. Their 2 4-drops are Supreme Verdict and Wandering Emperor, one of which we can't counter. With no answer in hand to Supreme Verdict, we decide to make them have it rather than play around it and get in for 6 while we still can. Honestly, a 4th land would be great because then I could Phantom holding up Snare. But yeah, here's the verdict. I'm not at all surprised, so I have no responses to that. Unfortunate 3 for 1. I'm not sure about this play. Let me know in the comments what you think about it. Moving forward, we play a Cemetery Illuminator, see a Geistlight Snare on top of our library, and pass. After playing a land and passing back, we see a land on top of our library with Illuminator. Not great. We decide to get in for 2 and hopefully counter whatever our opponent plays. Well, it looks like our opponent is playing around counterspells and decides to bounce our dude with Otawara. Opponent plays a Narset trying to refuel. We will try to counter it. Dovin's Veto. Guess we don't counter it. Our opponent grabs an Absorb off of Narset and passes. Tough decision here. I decide to run out a Supreme Phantom holding up a counterspell instead of activating Faceless and putting our opponent to 6. While this might not be a winnable game, not getting in with Faceless here was likely a mistake. Our opponent got a temporary lockdown. That's gross. I am so happy to draw a land here because it means we can turn on our Faceless Haven right now, go to combat, and swing in holding up a counterspell. Beautiful. That is exactly what we want to see. I will kill Narset, or I will attempt to kill Narset. Oh, I should have attacked Face. I'm bad at the game. If I put him to 4, I could activate Faceless. But because I didn't, now they're gonna get our Supreme, and they get another turn. It was greedy too, because Narset wasn't shutting anything down and they weren't getting any value off her. I should have gone Face. Lyra Dawnbringer, actually, okay, my opponent just loses. Cool. I was really worried about these 2 free cards they have. Oh, they have a Mystical Dispute. Got it. Okay. Never mind. Yikes. With a Lyra Dawnbringer on the table, temporary lockdown, Absorb, and who knows what else in hand, this match is not looking very good for us. Our out now is to draw into a Shacklegeist and stop our opponent from stabilizing with Lyra. We did not rip a Shacklegeist off. Staring down a big scary angel and an opponent at 5 life, we decide to boot up the 5 power Faceless and force a trade. Except we don't actually do that because Lyra Dawnbringer has first strike. Alright, we lose this game. With our opponent at 10 life, our Faceless Haven dead, and them gaining life all over the place, there's no way to come back from this. Opponent has 6 cards in hand, 2 of them known. Even if we rip a Shacklegeist, it's a punt. Go to game 3. We're on the play for game 3, and this hand will do it. I wish I had a second blue source, but 2 1-drops, Spectral Sailor is going to play around Portable Hole, and then we're off to the races with Curious Obsession, backing it up with Mystical Dispute. I guess backing up is a relative term because without a second blue source, there's nothing we can do about this fateful absence. Our dude dies. Draw Geistlight Snare. Okay, that's a good card, but we need to hit our land drop. Crack the clue, dig for a land. Yikes. Well, no threat on board. We pass. Our opponent plays Narset and finds a March of Otherworldly Light. Without a threat on board, we're unable to hit Narset, meaning they're going to get another card off of it. Woof. Opponent untaps, kills our dude, and finds a portable hole off of Narset. Gross. Well, we still didn't draw land. This time, though, we're gonna run out a Wanderer instead. After a portable hole on the Wanderer, we finally find our third land. We run out a Mausoleum Wanderer and pass, holding up either protection or a counterspell. Our opponent cycles and makes a 2/2 Shark. Annoying. They play Teferi, Hero of Dominaria on their turn. We will most definitely counter that. We untap and draw a Curious Obsession, which is a great card, but does nothing with Narset on the table. While we really want to start drawing with Obsession, we need to pressure our opponent's life total. Against control, it's the only way we win this match. Our opponent digs with Omen of the Sea, buys Yorion, and passes. Draw another Wanderer, which I'm never going to complain about. Let's play it to grow our other Wanderer, kill Narset, and hopefully start drawing cards with Obsession next turn. Our opponent plays another Omen on the end step, which is a bad sign with that Yorion in their hand. On their turn, they play another portable hole, which, besides killing something now, is another possible blink target for Yorion. This isn't good. Our opponent thinks about playing Yorion, but decides to hold up mana instead. Alright, we finally get to obsess this turn, but with all this open mana, our opponent has to have something. We get in, they try to march. Okay, that forces us to rattle chains. In response, our opponent makes a 2/2 Shark token and chumps both of our dudes, stopping a draw off the Obsession. Tapped out, we have to pass the turn. Our opponent casts Yorion, blinking both of the Omens and one of the portable holes. They give us back our Mausoleum Wanderer, but this is how we lose our Curious Obsession. We lose our draw engine, and we don't draw a Shacklegeist. Our biggest issue now is this 4/5 flying Yorion. Without a third land for the Faceless Haven, our out now is to set up for an Alpha Strike next turn. Our opponent decides to get in with Yorion on their turn, which... oh, they have a Lyra Dawnbringer again? Unfortunately, we can't actually counter this spell, but we can make them use their mana. Alright, this is the closest to being tapped out our opponent will ever be. We're gonna take full advantage of it. The plan is to phase out Lyra Dawnbringer, and then if we draw either an untapped land or a lord, we can get in for 8 damage. After that, it's just a couple more points. Well, wish I would have known that was on top before I slipped, but it's fine. We were being as efficient as possible with our mana. I'm not gonna sweat it. Our out now, get in for 4, hit him down to 6. We can't afford to let them gain life with Lyra, so the plan is to bounce it with Mystical Dispute backup, and then top deck a Shacklegeist the following turn. Our opponent has a counterspell, so we are forced to Mystical Dispute, but they have enough mana to pay for it, meaning that if they want to keep Lyra on the table, they can. We really have to top deck a Shacklegeist. Opponent gets in with their now 6/6 Lyra, thanks to our slip, basically switching our life totals. Alright, if we don't top deck an answer to Lyra, we're out of this game. I don't know, we just lose. Yeah, you got that right. Even if we would have drawn a Shacklegeist, our opponent going up to 15 is huge. Even though I don't think there's a single way to win from here, I give it one more turn cycle. Our opponent puts us to 4 and goes to 21, and we top deck a Faceless Haven. That's not good enough. GG's opponent. Hello. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'm Vampire Casshawk, you can also call me Cassidy, and this is my new Magic the Gathering focused YouTube channel where we cover Pioneer and Commander. This Mono Blue Spirits video was the first in a series I'm calling Pioneer 101, where I cover the major tiered decks of the format with deck techs, individual card breakdowns, and gameplay. A couple weeks ago, I qualified for Regional Championship Dallas playing Blue-White Spirits at Old World Games here in Scottsdale, Arizona. Playing all the decks in the format myself, I hope will give me a much better understanding of how to play against them once June comes around. You can also expect coverage of that tournament. I think I'll make an introduction video at some point, but a couple other things. I currently work at Gamers Guild AZ, which is a local game store and online retail site based out of Phoenix, Arizona. Go check them out. Love my company. I have 2 cats. Their names are Buki and Bokuto. We have a fish named Bonsai. I live with my girlfriend Phoebe and our 2 roommates Reese and Grace. We all play Magic. We love Commander. You'll see some Commander gameplay eventually on this channel as well. We did play an entire league with this Mono Blue Spirits deck, ended up going 4-1. However, the reason you're only seeing the first match is because I've had this video in the editing tank for over 2 months at this point, and I'm getting too lost in the production quality sauce. So I needed to get this video posted out the door so I could get the momentum rolling and get more videos posted. With that in mind, I'd like some of your feedback, so if you could head down to the comments, tell me what you liked about this coverage type, what is your preferred kind of gameplay commentary, things of that nature. I want to know what you guys think about this video. Also, if you have any recommendations for Pioneer decks you want me to cover in future videos, send them down there. I'm planning on getting to all of the decks in the format, so I'd love to see what you're interested in. I'll make it happen over the next few weeks. That's it for me. I'm gonna get this video posted and out the door, and I'll see you all on the internet. Bye.